Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for staying for lunch and for listening about education. You know, people often don't like to talk about school because it was hard and it took a long time, and we were 22 and we were just much better looking back then. But school is really, really important, and what's going on in our country is it's really almost frightening. You know, of course it's a truism. We have a skills gap. We have people who don't have the skills that we need, and. I just want to share a few statistics about how dire that situation is. In 1950, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked 270 job categories. There were 840 in 2010, and data scientist and big data architect and digital marketing specialist are not among them. We have a lot of need for very new and very different skills. Universities are trying to keep up. According to the New York Times, between 1985 and 2010, the number of programs of study at universities jumped from 462 to 2,620. Wow. So a lot of programs, a lot of schools. We read that there's still a skills gap. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Too many jobs going unfilled, too many people who don't have the skills we need. And there's a lot of hand-wringing. The facts are really pretty chilling. Students are not finishing college in 6 years. 40 million Americans have some college education. Most of them also have some debt, but they don't have degrees. Well, 22 million people have debt, and that debt is $1.2 trillion. That's holding our economy back. They're not investing in things like houses and families. Another big problem, 96% of chief academic officers think their schools are doing a good job. I used to be one of those. You know, it makes me a little anxious. The problem is, of course, that 89% of the business community thinks universities are not doing a good job. So, huge disconnect. And we have to sort it out. But perhaps the most concerning, in 2010, there were 21 million people in the United States doing something in higher education. And today there are only 19.2 million. Now, education is countercyclical, right? If there are jobs, people don't go to school. That's a big difference. It's a big, big difference. People aren't going to school. And that's one of the reasons that I joined Kaplan University. Now, of course, we're a for-profit university. We're not going to talk about that today, although I'm sure that there are lots of opinions in the room about it. But we teach adults at Kaplan University. 95% of our students are non-traditional. Our typical student, a 34-year-old single mother. Now, nobody who's a 34-year-old single mother wants to go to university. They have to. They have to so that they can help their families. We have risk factors. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the risk factors. What prevents people from finishing school? If they've got a full-time job, if their parents aren't supporting them, if they've got kids, the kinds of things you would expect that make school harder. Our typical student has 3.7 of those risk factors. They are the 40 million people with some college education. And the challenge that we all face is adults in college are the new normal, and adults don't have time to go to college. They don't have the financial resources, and they don't have the time. That's a huge concern in our society today because, to be frank, that's one of the reasons that we have all kinds of challenges with equality and equity in this country. People who graduate from university at 22 are not facing the problems that people who are single parents going to school at 34 are. And it's incumbent upon all of us to think about that problem very deeply and to figure out what to do about it. So I left traditional education in 2008, and lots of people, lots of my colleagues thought I was selling out. Oh yeah, you're going to the easy life. Well, that's not true. I went to Kaplan University because, and I know you now know I was at Case Western Reserve. I wouldn't have shared that. Many, many great universities in the country that do a very good job at what they're supposed to be doing. But I left one of them. Case has been a top 50 university forever. I left there because they didn't need me. Students who go to Case have the financial, emotional, and intellectual capacity to get out of Case without me helping them. Many people say, you could just put them in a dark room for 4 years and they'd probably be fine. I don't think that's true. I do think that we do educate people at universities. But that's not the case at Kaplan University. And our graduation rate is really low. It's almost double what it is at typical schools with the same kinds of students. Helping students finish university when they've got all these challenges is really, really tough work. Now, lots of you are going to know Kaplan. You did the SAT, you did LSAT, you did GMAT prep, and you're familiar with our test prep organization. Kaplan's a lot more than test prep. We've got 19,000 employees in 30 countries. We teach school internationally. We've got a big English language business. We bring foreign students into the United States, help them for a year, bring them into American universities. And we have Kaplan University. Kaplan University has 38,000 students. Most of them are online, although we also have 15 campuses. And we have a School of Professional and Continuing Education where almost 500,000 people a year make use of our continuing education, much of it for licensure and credentialing, but also some of it for leadership development and so forth. We're a big place. And we have lots of opportunities at Kaplan to help fix the skills gap. The thing is, we can't do it alone. Employers and universities, and not just our university, employers and universities have to work together. So I want to spend a minute explaining how we're working on the skills gap, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about the general concerns that we've all got. At Kaplan University, we want to make sure that people get in and get out. That's our objective. Most people who come to us have, as I said earlier, have some education. We don't want them to learn the same material twice. We don't have rules like many other institutions where, well, if you didn't learn it at my university, we can't be sure that you really know what you say you know. We accept transfer credit from other universities. We also accept portfolio credit. What that means is if somebody's been working for a decade and has built some skills up, we will let them submit a portfolio and our faculty will evaluate it to see if that portfolio merits university credit. We also let people take assessments. You may never have taken math at university, but you're a bookkeeper. You can do the math, and we'll let you demonstrate that through an assessment. And finally, and this is perhaps the most exciting, we work with companies and with the military to take their training as long as it's being tested. Lots of companies have lots of training, but they never test to see if anybody ever really learned anything. When you test, we can take that in and we can give university credit for that as well, as long as our faculty believe that this, according to the syllabi and the tests and assessments, that it's worthwhile. So we can award more credit not only because we accept it from all these unusual places, but also because we've divided our curriculum into littler pieces. So the coin of the realm at university is the credit hour. And most courses are 3 credit hours long, right? Everybody knows that. At Kaplan, we've divided our curriculum into competencies. We still have credit hours, but each 3-credit course or 5-credit course has competencies associated with it. And so our students just have to demonstrate the competencies one at a time. what our registrar says is that gives us the opportunity to give change for a $3 bill. If you know two of 5 competencies, you don't have to take them again. You just have to quickly pick up those 3 that you don't have. Back to our bookkeeper, she probably knows 2/5, 3/5 of the basic accounting course. Why should she have to do the whole thing just because she doesn't have all of it? We've got a medic from the military. He shouldn't have to learn how to dress a wound to become a nurse. These are the things that help get people through school faster. The thing is, of course, you only want to give credit where credit is due. And the only way that you can give credit where credit is due is if you know what the value is of the credit and you know how to assess it. An assessment is really the core of the challenge that we all face. One of our recent grads has credits from 7 institutions. You want to say, honey, what were you thinking? But that's where she came in with. She's done. She took less than a year. We couldn't take all her credits because there were doubles and all kinds of challenges, but we took as many as we could, and she's done now, and she's got a degree. Are you going to hire her? Because these folks need jobs as well as degrees. And how do you know that this degree from this person who got it from all these different places is going to be valuable to you and your organization? People set aside resumes of applicants from universities that they don't know or recognize. What kind of university is that? I'm not going to look at that person. That sounds an awful lot to me like the challenge that Stanley Kaplan felt in the 1930s. He went into the test prep business because he couldn't get into medical school with his Jewish-sounding name. And that's how we were in the 30s. Now, they had ethnic quotas. Does that sound realistic? Like, does that sound the kind, that today we just say, oh my gosh. But that was the basis of the test prep business. I'm hoping that we can move beyond that, and that university name is no longer going to define whether or not somebody's worth talking to. Kevin Carey, who's going to be up on stage in a little bit, wrote very eloquently in his book, The End of College, how employers use school name because it's easy. And I get it. I use school name too. When I hear somebody's come from one of the top 50, I say, oh, wow, good. They must be pretty smart. We all do it. And yet, it's part of the skills gap that happens. There's another challenge. Maybe we don't have it right. Maybe the competencies we're creating at Kaplan aren't the right ones. We know that our students have the competencies that we say they do, but maybe they're not the right competencies. Maybe we aren't assessing them the right way. So what we do and try to get information about is every time we place somebody, after a few months, we send a note and we say, how is this person doing? Did they learn what we said they did? Are they a good employee? What skills are they missing? The response rate is abysmal. Most people don't respond to that request. So the feedback loop is broken. We've got to fix the feedback loop, we've got to agree on competencies, and we have to figure out how we can bring this huge group of 40 million people into higher education. We have some standard measures. At Kaplan University, we're very proud of the fact that Peregrine has evaluated our MBA program, and students coming in are not as clever as students going into other universities in terms of their test. And when they leave Kaplan, they're much better than average. So we pat ourselves on the back and we say, great, our students start lower, they end higher, we teach more than others do. Sounds an awful lot like inside baseball, doesn't it? Like, you don't know who Peregrine is. You don't know that the other schools in the ACBSP, are they good, are they bad? ACBSP, AACSB, like, what are we talking about here? That's what we have to deal with. And figuring out whether or not any of that makes any difference as we employ students, as we employ graduates, is something all of you have to deal with. No wonder you go back and say, well, I know if they went to Harvard, they're probably pretty good, right? Those are the trade-offs today. But we have other ways. We've got credentials. Now, the thing about credentials, we've talked about university credentials, but then there's also licensing, the bar, NCLEX, CFP, CFA. You're all very familiar with those licensing credentials. And they do some good because you know if they've passed that test, at least they were able to do that stuff on that day. There are other credentials, and there are associations all over the place who are creating credentials. SPHR, PMP, CISSP, you might know some of them, you might not. You can become a certified ethical hacker. Somebody wants to, it's a credential. At Kaplan University, we've got programs that lead to 143 different credentials. What are we thinking? Who knows if those are all good credentials? Do you folks pay attention to credentials when you hire? Is it, do you look and say, oh, if they don't have this credential, we're not going to look at that resume? These are the conversations that we have to have, because until universities have something better, they're going to be teaching to tests because they want their students to succeed. Now, for some of you, it would be much better to know, listen, we created the curriculum. Those folks are doing exactly what we want them to do. When they pass that curriculum, we know that they're ready to be hired by us. Some organizations do that very, very successfully. The American military has enough people so that they can develop curriculum. But creating curriculum is a lot of work. At most universities, it takes years to create a course, let alone a whole degree. Now, any faculty member could change their course whenever they feel like it. Most of them, and not most of them, I have to be fair here, many of them don't feel like it as quickly as industry needs them to feel like it. And that's another huge, huge challenge, because there's not a lot of motivation to fix your curriculum that's been working really well the last 3 years, or if you're not working on curriculum, you could be doing some research that's going to move you towards tenure. Another whole conversation we're not going to have today. And that leaves me with the last kind of credential, that's soft skills. Now, people expect many soft skills of their employees. You have to be able to work in a team, you have to be able to look professional, you have to show leadership, you've got to be comfortable in a diverse workforce, you've got to communicate, you've got to think critically. We teach all these skills at Kaplan University. We assess our students on them over and over and over again, and they do not appear on the transcript. The transcript has course numbers on it. Do you folks look at transcripts when you hire? I don't even know. Some people do, most don't. But so you care about these skills. We teach to these skills. You're not telling us whether or not we're doing a good job. But we believe we are, and so we've created a competency report. And that competency report allows a graduate to say, these are the skills I've learned, and this is the level of mastery that I've achieved. I would love it if other universities approached competency in that way and said, okay, we're not going to worry about transcripts, we're going to tell about what you've actually learned. The trouble is, you've got to believe it. How can a student or a graduate looking for a job say, yeah, this is good stuff. This competency report is good stuff. That brings us back to third parties who have to then assess. Assessing is expensive. These are the kinds of challenges that we're all facing. Now, there may be some really easy solutions here. I haven't figured out what they are, but I do know that universities and employers need to work together. We have to look at this problem together. And, the CED is doing some work on essential competencies. Theirs are not exactly the same as the ones I just listed, but pretty darn close. I encourage everyone in this room to participate in that work. I certainly plan to, because if we can figure out not how to standardize the disciplinary work, but the soft skills that we all expect of people working in our organizations, that starts helping things move forward. And as far as the disciplinary skills are concerned, there's another statistic. Apparently, and I kind of believe it, what students learn starting school in 2016, so the students that are going to be starting this fall, hopefully they'll be done in 4 years, will possibly last them for the first 5 years of their career. Now, my undergraduate degree featured COBOL programming, and it's not very useful anymore. But 5 years, that's really a short period of time. So all those disciplinary skills that form part of the skills gap have to be retaught and retaught and retaught because they're going to be changing. And who's going to pay for that? Do we expect our employees to reskill themselves? Who's got the time for that? When you've got an employee who's got a family, who's got a mortgage, who's got other things they have to do, when are they going to reskill? On your time or on their own time? They're going to have to reskill. So we've got two kinds of problems. People who can't finish university because they don't have the time or the financial resources, and people who have to reskill but can't because they don't have the time or the financial resources. These are the challenges that I hope that we'll be able to talk about together in this conversation this afternoon. We have to address them as a society, and we have to address them as people worried about equity and equality in the United States. So, as my father, who did not finish grade school, says, when there's pick and shovel work to be done, we might as well just get started. Thank you.